The attic groaned under Mark Tilbury's weight as he knelt beside a cracked wooden beam, flashlight clamped between his teeth. Rain tapped faintly against the roof above, a quiet percussion that matched the stillness of their North London home. Clara was downstairs playing piano. Debussy again, soft and sad, like always on Sundays. He didn't expect to find anything, just a leak, something to fix, something normal. But tucked behind a faded shoebox filled with birthday cards was a slim rectangular box, yellowed at the edges. Mark pulled it free with a curious grunt. It had no label, no writing, just the clean, impersonal design of a commercial DNA test. He stared at it for a moment. Then, "Clara?" he called down, voice echoing in the beams. "Did you order one? Of those ancestry kits?" The piano stopped mid-note. A pause. "No," she said after a beat. "Why?" Mark didn't answer. He turned the box in his hands. It was sealed, unused. Something about it unsettled him. Not in a dramatic way, just a pressure behind the ribs, like the beginning of a bad dream. That evening after dinner he brought it up again. Clara sat opposite him, her long fingers wrapped around a glass of white wine she hadn't touched. Her hair was down, a rare sight, but her eyes were unreadable. "It was probably a gift," she said. "One of those marketing gimmicks." "You're sure?" She nodded too quickly. "Of course, just throw it out." He watched her. She never liked clutter, but something in her voice, too smooth, too rehearsed, made him tuck the box into his coat pocket instead. 2 days later, Mark sent in the kit. He didn't know why. He told himself it was harmless curiosity, a chance to trace his grandfather's Irish roots or confirm the family myth about Scandinavian blood. But beneath that, unspoken, was something else. A whisper he couldn't name. Clara didn't ask about it again. The silence between them stretched in quiet increments. She stopped playing piano. He started staying later at work. Their dinners became mechanical. One Thursday evening, as they sat in the living room in flickering TV light, Mark asked without looking up, "You ever think about kids?" Clara stiffened. "That's out of nowhere." "Is it?" She didn't respond. Mark turned to her, watching the faint twitch in her jaw. "I just think we never really talked about it. Not properly." "We did," she said carefully. "We decided it wasn't the right time. We decided, or you did." Her wine glass clinked against the table too hard. She stood. "I'm not having this conversation tonight." She left the room, footsteps light but sharp. On Saturday morning, the test results arrived in his inbox. Mark stared at the email for a long time before opening it. His heartbeat pulsed in his ears, absurdly loud in the stillness of the kitchen. Possible immediate relative found, parent-child relationship. Match confidence, 99.99999%. The name was redacted. He scrolled, reread, blinked. It didn't make sense. He had no children, never had. He and Clara had been together 10 years, married for 7. His chest tightened. That evening, Mark stood outside the closed attic door, staring up at the wooden frame. Rain fell again, soft but steady. The same as last Sunday. Behind him, Clara moved through the house like a ghost, silent, weightless, always one room away. And suddenly the house didn't feel like theirs anymore. It felt like a puzzle he'd never been given all the pieces to. Mark didn't mention the email that night. He barely slept, eyes wide open in the dim glow of the alarm clock, the numbers changing sluggishly as if time itself was hesitating. By morning, the silence between him and Clara had thickened into something almost tangible. A fog he couldn't move through, couldn't escape. He sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, the DNA results printed in black and white beside him. Parent-child relationship. Confidence, 99%. No name, no photo, just numbers, just truth. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. Soft padding down the stairs, each step measured. Clara entered the kitchen wearing her pale gray robe, hair tied back, face composed. Mark slid the paper across the table without a word. She didn't sit. Her eyes scanned the page. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. "I don't understand," she said finally, voice low. "What is this? You tell me. It's a mistake." "It's not." Clara stared at the page again, as if the lines would rearrange themselves into something gentler, something plausible. "I don't have a child," Mark said. "So how do I share 99.9% DNA with one?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Was it before me?" He pressed. "Is that it? Something you forgot to mention? Something you didn't think mattered?" "No." Her voice cracked on the word. "Mark, I don't know where this came from. Maybe it was mixed up in the lab. Maybe someone else." He stood, chair scraping back loudly. "I sent in the sample. Myself. No names, no identifiers. The results are blind." Clara's face had gone pale. Her hands trembled at her sides. Mark stepped closer. "You know something?" "No, Clara." She backed against the counter. "Mark, please." He saw it in her then. That flicker. Not just fear, recognition. A wall cracking behind. Her carefully built mask. "You're lying to me." "No." "Yes," he said, voice shaking. "You are." Later that day, he sat in his car outside the house, staring at the attic window. He had gone back up after the confrontation. Looked again. Touched the corners, the floorboards, the old insulation. The test kit had been hidden deliberately. Not lost, not forgotten. Hidden. The attic wasn't just a storage space. It had been used, recently. There was a faint imprint on the dusty mattress. A broken crayon on the floor. A smell, faintly of apples, faintly of something else. Children had a smell, and that terrified him. That night, Mark tried again. Calmly this time. "Who is the child?" Clara shook her head. "You're not protecting me," he said. "You're protecting yourself." She met his eyes. Finally, a long silence, then quietly, "I never meant for it to come out." He blinked. Clara looked down at her hands. "It was a long time ago, before we married." "But why would he show up as my child?" "I don't know." Mark watched her closely. She didn't flinch, but she didn't offer more. That was worse than lying. 3 days passed. Mark didn't push again. He began reading about DNA matches. In secret, half-siblings, adoptions, false paternity. Every scenario led him deeper into doubt, into anger. He considered going to the police, or a lawyer, but part of him wasn't ready. Not yet. Then one morning, Clara was gone. Not for long, just half an hour, she said. A walk to clear her head. But when Mark checked the attic again later that day, something had changed. The crayon was gone. So was the mattress. The faint smell, gone too. As if she had erased it. But she forgot one thing. Wedged deep in the insulation behind a loose panel was a photograph. Grainy, faded, torn at the corner. A boy. 6, maybe 7. Brown. Eyes, black curls, looking straight into the camera, and standing just behind him was Clara. Mark stared at the photograph in his hand for hours before confronting Clara again. But something in him had changed. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a quiet, growing dread. The kind that nested beneath your ribs and refused to leave. The boy was real, and Clara knew. But every time he looked at the child's face, something else gnawed at him. Not recognition exactly, but a pull. Something his bones remembered before his mind did. The next morning, Mark returned to the attic. He waited until Clara left for her yoga class, the same one she never missed, the only time she gave him space. The attic greeted him with dust and silence. He scanned it again, slower this time, more deliberately. He tapped the wooden panels with the butt of a screwdriver, listening for hollow echoes. Halfway through the back wall, he found it. Thunk, different sound. Shallow, padded, like empty space. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the panel. The air behind it felt cooler. Still. Gripping the edge of the panel, he pulled. Nothing. He pried at the sides until a narrow seam revealed itself. barely visible unless you were looking for it. He jammed the screwdriver between the boards and heaved. Crack. A square section broke free, and behind it, darkness. Not just an empty wall. A room. He crawled through the opening, flashlight flickering. Inside was a narrow crawl space, no bigger than a child's bedroom. The ceiling sloped with the roofline. One small square window was nailed shut from the inside. Light filtered through. A dusty sheet tacked over it. The room was quiet and lived in. On the floor was a thin mattress, no sheet. A threadbare stuffed rabbit lay on its side, one eye missing. A plastic plate, a spoon, a stack of children's books, one open to a crayon drawing, a red house with a blue door and a stick figure inside. There were scratch marks near the door frame and a worn path on the floorboards, pacing over and over. Mark stood frozen in the cramped space, heart thudding. He whispered, "What the hell is this, Clara?" That evening, he said nothing. He watched her move around the kitchen, barefoot, slicing cucumbers, her face calm. Too calm. "How long?" he asked. She looked up. "How long what?" "The room. Upstairs." Her hand froze mid-slice. "Is that where you kept him?" She dropped the knife. Silence hung between them. Thick. Unbreathable. Then she picked up the blade with shaking fingers and whispered, "You shouldn't have gone in there." "I had every right." "No," she said softly. "You didn't." She didn't say anything else. She went upstairs and shut the bedroom door. Mark sat in the dark for hours. He didn't know what was worse, the fact that the room existed, or that it felt so familiar. Like something out of a nightmare he'd had as a child, except he'd never been in that room before. Had he? He picked up the photograph again. The boy's eyes stared back, too old for his face, sad, watchful, and behind him Clara's hand rested on his shoulder, possessive, protective, like a secret she never intended to share. Mark rose and walked to the attic once more. He sat on the mattress, the flashlight beside him. The rabbit stared up from the floor, and the silence pressed down on him like weight. Somewhere in this house a child had lived like a shadow, and somewhere Clara had decided that was better than the truth. Mark waited. Until Sunday. They always fought on Sundays. He used to think it was the quiet. Now he knew it was the weight of what they didn't say. He found Clara in the conservatory, sipping tea and pretending to read. Sunlight pooled across the tiled floor. Her robe was white, her bare feet tucked beneath her. From a distance, she looked like peace. But Mark no longer believed in appearances. He stepped inside without speaking. Clara looked up slowly. She saw it in his eyes. The inevitability. "I want the truth," he said. "All of it." She folded the page of her book but didn't close it. "About what?" "Don't," he snapped. "Not today," she sighed, leaning back. "What did you find now?" Mark sat across from her, elbows on knees, voice low. "The room is real. You kept a child in our attic. A child with a mattress and picture books and a window nailed shut. A child who calls me dad in a test I never consented to." Clara said nothing. "I found the photograph," he continued. "The boy with your hand on his shoulder. His name is Eli, isn't it?" Her jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have gone up there again." "Why?" he said, voice rising. "Because I might finally uncover who I've been living with?" "What kind of monster you've become?" Her eyes flashed. "Don't." Mark leaned forward. "Is he mine?" "No," she said. Quiet, sharp, final. The word cut clean through him. He stared at her. "Then how?" he whispered. "Why the DNA match?" Clara looked away. Mark stood up suddenly, pacing. "Is he adopted? Did you take someone's kid? Did you—" He stopped. "Was it a lie? The test?" "No." "Then how is he linked to me?" Her silence answered. "You used my DNA, didn't you?" His voice trembled now. "That test, it wasn't mine. It was his. You used my toothbrush, my hair. You wanted to see if I was related." Clara didn't deny it. Mark sat down hard, as if the floor had given out. His breath came shallow, like the air had changed density. You thought he might be mine? Clara finally looked him in the eye. I had to know. Why? He asked. Why now? Her voice broke. Because he's starting to look like you. The words slammed into his chest like a slow explosion. He pressed his palms against his face, hands shaking. I don't remember. There was never. You wouldn't, she said. You were drunk. You were gone a lot back then. There were months you barely spoke to me. He looked at her like she'd morphed into something else entirely. Are you saying I fathered a child and you never told me? Clara's expression was unreadable. I didn't know myself. Not for certain, until he got older, until I saw pieces of you in him. Mark laughed, bitter, sharp. So instead of asking me, you hid him in the attic like a ghost? He wasn't hidden, she snapped. He was safe. You kept him in a room with no light, no fresh air. Because I was terrified, she shouted. I didn't know what he was capable of. Mark froze. What do you mean? Clara's face went pale. He started hurting animals, she whispered. He'd snap bird necks, drown insects. He carved into the walls. He talked to someone who wasn't there. He said. She stopped herself. What? She looked haunted. He said his real father told him to. Mark felt ice crawl along his spine. He remembered the drawing in the attic, the red house, the figure in the window. He thought it had been a child's innocent sketch, but maybe it wasn't a home. Maybe it was a warning. He stood slowly. Where is Eli now? Clara didn't answer. Mark stepped closer, voice dark. Where is he? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know. Mark kept the photograph on his desk for days, not framed, just there, face up, staring, watching. He didn't know why he hadn't destroyed it. Maybe part of him still needed to believe Clara had imagined it all, that Eli was a disturbed child born from a mistake she regretted, that none of this had roots in him. But the photo told a different story. He took it to the pharmacy on Heath Road, asked the clerk if they could enhance it. When the boy's eyes came into sharper focus, something twisted in Mark's gut. It wasn't recognition exactly, it was reflection. That night, he dug through the attic again. Not the hidden room this time. The rest. The boxes Clara hadn't touched in years. He tore through old files, broken Christmas decorations, and moldy paperback novels. In a small tin marked CDs, buried beneath a tangle of wires, he found a second photo. Same boy, Eli, but younger, maybe 3, sitting on Clara's lap on what looked like their living room couch. A birthday cake in the corner of the frame. Clara smiled wide. Her eyes didn't. Mark slammed the photo on the kitchen table that morning. You lied. Again. Clara didn't look up from her mug. What now? This photo, he hissed. It's in our house. He wasn't just in the attic. He lived here. For years. She was silent. You said you only brought him here when he got difficult. But this was years ago. Clara finally met his gaze. He lived with us. For almost a year. You were working in Glasgow 3 weeks out of 4. I told you my sister was staying with her son. You never asked to meet them. Mark stared at her in disbelief. That was him? She nodded. I used to hear laughter upstairs, he muttered. I thought you had the TV on. You said it was movies. Clara's voice dropped. I thought if I gave him normalcy, he'd become normal. And when he didn't, I locked the door. The words settled over the room like dust. Mark picked up the photo again. You made him a prisoner. I made him safe, she snapped. He said things that didn't make sense, about people who weren't in the house, about seeing shadows. He told me he knew when I would die. Mark felt a cold breath crawl across his skin. He drew a picture, Clara whispered, of a woman lying in bed with red around her mouth. He said she was me. He smiled when he showed it to me. Mark sat down, slowly. Clara, Where is he now? I told you. I don't know. He didn't believe her. He couldn't. That night, Mark sat alone in the attic room, photograph in one hand, flashlight in the other. The air was still. He looked at the child's drawing again. Not the red house one. Another, folded beneath the mattress, a new one. It showed two figures in a house, one tall, one small, both standing in front of the attic door. He heard a creak behind him. Turned. Nothing there. But when he looked at the floor, at the dust, he saw it, a small footprint. Fresh. The next morning, Mark stood in the back garden staring up at the attic window. He'd dusted the glass from the inside. The print was unmistakable. A small hand, fingers splayed. Fresh enough that condensation had formed around it, not over it. He hadn't imagined it. Someone had been standing there, watching. Mark didn't tell Clara. She'd stopped speaking much anyway. Her silences were longer, heavier. She moved through the house like someone underwater, slow, distant, unreachable. Instead, he turned to the neighborhood. Quiet streets, clipped hedges, retired couples and new families who all politely kept to themselves, except for one. Her name was Mrs. Dobbins. She lived 2 doors down in a cottage swallowed by ivy and thyme. People called her the one with one eye, though no one said it to her face. She wore thick bifocals and a crocheted shawl, always smelled faintly of rose water and pipe tobacco, and had an unsettling way of remembering things no one else did. Mark approached her garden gate slowly. She was already waiting. "Mr. Tilbury," she called. "I was wondering when you'd come." Mark blinked. "You know me?" Mrs. Dobbins smiled. Her left eye was a glass orb, clouded and still. "I know everyone, and I've seen enough to know when something's gone rotten." He hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "You already are." Mark glanced up toward his roof, visible just beyond the neighbor's hedge. "Have you ever seen anything up in our attic window?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned on her cane and shuffled closer. "I used to see him often," she said. "Small thing. Big eyes. Would watch me hang the laundry. Thought he was a nephew or a foster child, maybe. Never waved." Mark swallowed. "When was this?" "Oh, started about 3 years ago, ended last spring. Maybe summer. Don't see him anymore." Mark's heart skipped. "You're sure it was a child?" Mrs. Dobbins chuckled. "Unless you've got a very small man hiding in your attic, yes." He stood frozen. "Did you ever tell anyone?" "Tried once," she said. "Told the council. They said it wasn't their business. Told Clara, too." Mark stiffened. "You told Clara?" "Of course," I said. "Lovely boy you have up there. Keeps to himself." And she looked at me like I'd set her dress on fire. "What did she say?" Mrs. Dobbins leaned forward. "She said I'd seen wrong, that I must be remembering some other child. Then she told me never to speak of it again." Mark left her house in a daze. He didn't drive home. He walked, slowly, as if gravity had increased. Every word felt like a hammer against his ribs. 3 years. Eli had been in the attic 3 years ago, long before Clara ever told him the boy existed. That night, Mark waited until Clara was asleep. He climbed into the attic again, this time carrying a camera and a tape recorder. He sat on the mattress, waited. The air was still. The room silent. Then, a whisper, so faint he thought it might be wind through the eaves. He leaned closer to the small vent in the wall, pressed the recorder near it. A boy's voice, whispering. She lied. She always lies. Mark dropped the recorder. His blood turned to ice. He backed out of the crawl space, trembling, descended the ladder, and shut the attic door. It didn't matter anymore if Clara talked. Eli already had. Mark sat at the edge of his bed, the recorder clutched in both hands like something sacred or dangerous. The room around him was quiet. Too quiet. Clara hadn't come out since dinner. She barely touched her food, never met his eyes. He pressed play. At first, just static. A low hum, interrupted by the occasional pop. Then a thump, soft, distant, like footsteps above. And then the whisper. She lied. She always lies. A pause. Another. Whisper, almost clearer now. Child's voice, male, calm. He thought he didn't know me. Mark's blood chilled. Then the voice continued. But I remember him. He leaned forward, every hair on his arm standing. He replayed the clip, turned the volume higher. I saw him once, in the hallway. He was angry. She told him not to go, upstairs. The recording crackled. I think he forgot. Mark stood up slowly, pressing pause. That hallway, the one outside the attic door. It was the same one he used to walk half asleep during his overnight returns from Glasgow. One night, he had awakened on the floor face down, convinced he had sleepwalked. He'd told Clara. She said he'd probably been drinking. Mark had believed her. He pressed play again. Another whisper. She said he'd never want me. That he didn't love anyone but himself. A short laugh. Dry, hollow. She said I was like him. Mark flinched. Then a rustling sound, the mic scraping against something. I left something for him. Behind the wall. He'll find it. The static spiked, then silence. Mark stared at the recorder, his breath uneven. He played the last line over and over. Behind the wall. He grabbed a flashlight and bolted up the stairs. The attic was darker tonight. The air heavier. Mark crawled into the hidden room again. Same mattress, same rabbit, same dust. He pressed his ear to the back wall. Nothing, but there was a seam, barely visible, in the paneling behind the vent. He wedged his fingers into the crack and pulled. The wood groaned. It opened. Inside, a shoebox. He brought it out. Hands trembling, heart pounding. He opened the lid, a bundle of paper, crayon drawings, notes, and a single photograph. Mark, from years ago, laughing, at a bar, arm around a woman. Not Clara. He stared. His mind reached backward, through fog and wine and missing nights. He remembered the woman's name. Anna. One night. Never mentioned again. He had never known she got pregnant, or that Clara had found out. He sat down hard, then a final note, written in shaky blue crayon. I wanted to know if he was like me. Underneath, a drawing of two stick figures, one larger, one smaller, both with red scribbles across their eyes. Mark dropped the box. His hands were shaking. Behind him, the attic floor creaked. He turned. Fast. Nothing. But the stuffed rabbit had moved. It was now sitting upright, facing him. Mark stared at it. Then he whispered, Eli? No answer. Only the quiet. And the faint sound of a child laughing. Somewhere in the walls. Mark didn't speak to Clara that night. He couldn't. The shoebox sat hidden beneath his bed, untouched like a sealed coffin. Every time he glanced at it, the image of that drawing flashed in his mind. The two figures with their eyes crossed out in red. He tried to sleep. Couldn't. By morning, Clara was gone. Not gone from the house, gone from herself. She sat in the kitchen, staring out the window, unmoving, the kettle hissing behind her, forgotten on the burner. Mark turned it off. You knew, he said softly. You've always known who his father was. Clara didn't answer. He stepped closer. You found the photo, the woman, Anna. You found out before I ever knew. She blinked slowly. You wouldn't remember her. You barely remembered where. You were those days. I remember enough, he said, voice raw. And I remember I never hurt anyone. Clara's mouth twitched. Maybe not with your hands. The doorbell rang before he could answer. Mark opened it to find a woman standing with a tote bag and nervous eyes. She looked like Clara. Older, worn, thinner. But there was a resemblance. Clara stood behind Mark, frozen. June, she breathed. The woman gave a small wave. I came because I heard. I saw the news about the police being called last year, about a wellness check, and I had to know if he was still here. Mark stepped aside silently. June sat on the edge of the couch, gripping her tote bag like it might fly away. I haven't spoken to her in nearly 6 years, she said. Not since Eli was born. Mark sat across from her, Clara still standing, behind them both like a statue. He's mine, Clara said flatly. Not yours to speak about. June looked up sharply. He was never just yours. You don't get to lock away a human being and pretend that makes you a mother. Mark leaned forward. Tell me what happened. June hesitated, then opened her bag. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a birth certificate, Eli James Tilbury. Mother, Clara Reeves. Father, unknown. He was born in a clinic outside of Bristol, June said. No one knew she was pregnant. She had him alone. I found out when he was 4 months old. She refused to say who the father was, just said he was dangerous, said he had a darkness. Clara's fists clenched. Mark stared at the name, his name, Tilbury. I didn't even know she'd given him your name, June continued. She said she didn't trust anyone else to carry it, that it would keep him safe. Mark looked at Clara. You gave him my name before you even tested the DNA. Clara stared at the floor. I was scared. Of what? He asked. Of me? No, she whispered. Of him. June interrupted. She said he'd cry at nothing, laugh in his sleep, that he talked to shadows. But she never let anyone else see him long enough to know for sure. Clara turned on her. You didn't see what he did to the cat? June flinched. Mark's voice cracked. What did he do? Clara's voice was hollow. He smiled when it screamed. No one spoke. Then June pulled out a final envelope, worn, sealed. I wasn't sure if I should bring this, she said. But I found it in Mum's things. It's Clara's handwriting, dated before the boy was born. Clara's eyes widened. June handed it to Mark. He opened it slowly. Inside, a note. If he turns out like his father, I'll have no choice. I will do what must be done, even if it means hiding him forever. The ink was smudged, but the intent was clear. Mark looked up at Clara. She didn't cry. She just whispered, I was only trying to stop it from happening again. And then she left the room, barefoot, silent, disappearing up the stairs. Mark didn't sleep that night. The envelope from June rested on the kitchen table, its edges curling slightly, ink smudged as though the paper itself had absorbed fear. He stared at it for hours, tracing the words with trembling fingers. By morning, he knew he had to leave. Not to escape, but to search. To find the boy who had lived in shadows, whose existence Clara had folded into silence for years. He started with the local council. Papers, lists, forms, missing persons reports. He asked about anonymous tips, children reported as wandering or lost. The clerk eyed him, frowning. Mark didn't care. He wrote Eli's description down, every detail from June's recollection, every small memory from the attic. Days passed. Nothing. No reports. No sightings. It was as though the child had evaporated. At night, he returned home, slipping into the attic first. Flashlight in hand, he checked every corner, every panel, every seam. Dust was undisturbed. Only the faintest smell of apples lingered, the same smell that had haunted him since the first discovery. Mark tried to eat, tried to sleep, but the house had changed. Every creak, every shadow seemed to whisper Eli's name. And in the silence, he imagined the boy watching him, waiting. He started speaking aloud. Where are you? He whispered one night, voice raw. I just want to know if you're okay. Please. The walls didn't answer. A week later, a knock at the door. Sharp, urgent. It was a neighbor, young woman, pale, shaking. Mr. Tilbury, she said. I think I saw a boy in your window last night, watching me. He didn't move, but he was there, I swear. Mark's pulse jumped. Where? The small attic window, the one facing the lane. He was just staring. I left the lights off. He didn't blink. Mark thanked her, her eyes wide with fear. She left, glancing back as if the boy might still be there. He climbed the stairs immediately. The attic door creaked. Dust motes hung in the beam of his flashlight. The small window had been cleared, wiped clean. No prints, No handprints, only the reflection of his own face, pale and drawn. He whispered, "Eli?" No answer. Hours later, Mark found the shoebox from June. The drawings, the photograph, the note. He flipped through them, desperately seeking a clue he'd missed. One drawing stopped him cold. Eli, stick figure with red eyes, another figure behind him, outlined in black. Words scrawled beneath. "He watches while she sleeps." Mark froze. He thought of Clara, thought of June, thought of the whispers on the tape, the laugh, the shadowy footprints, the room, a sudden sound behind him, a soft scuff. He whipped around. Nothing. Then again, a small shuffle, deliberate. Mark swallowed, heart hammering. Who's there? Silence. But the attic felt different, smaller. He could almost feel presence, a weight pressing down, just behind him, where the hidden room's wall met the ceiling. He edged toward the vent, peering through the slats. Nothing visible, only shadows, only the echo of footsteps that might not exist. He whispered again, quieter this time. "Eli, if you're here, I won't hurt you." The attic remained silent. Then, a faint whisper, childlike, yet chilling. "You'll never find me." Mark froze. The words hung in the air, heavier than the dust, heavier than the silence. He wanted to run. He wanted to call Clara, June, anyone. But he stayed, rooted to the floor, flashlight trembling in his hands. Eli wasn't gone. He was still here, watching, waiting. Mark sat at the edge of the attic ladder, the flashlight's beam shaking in his grip. The shoebox lay open before him. Drawings, photographs, and the crumpled note from Clara, edges smudged. His mind circled around the whisper, the laugh, the footprints, the last message on the recorder. "You'll never find me." He couldn't ignore it anymore. Eli was here, in some corner of the house, or maybe he never left at all. Mark went to the basement. Old trunks lined the walls, thick with dust and cobwebs. He pulled each one open, searching for the hidden, the forgotten, the misplaced. Nothing. Until a faint rattling drew his attention to a rusted filing cabinet. The bottom drawer stuck. He pried it open. Inside, folders labeled with dates, months, and years overlapping, in Clara's neat handwriting. And then he saw it, a series of photographs. Not just of Eli, of Mark. Taken from behind curtains, from across streets, from angles that suggested deliberate observation. His own life documented, catalogued. Dates matched the same time frames he had been away for work in Glasgow. Mark's stomach dropped. He flipped through more. Handwritten notes accompanied each image, observations, timelines. He sleeps in the nursery. Observed crying at 3:14 a.m. Clara's responses consistent with instructions. Instructions. Mark's hands shook. "Clara," he whispered. No answer. The house remained quiet, almost too quiet. Then a sound, a whisper, low and teasing, coming from the vent above the corner of the basement. "You shouldn't have come here." Mark froze. He held the flashlight high. Shadows pooled in the corners. Heart hammering, he leaned closer to the vent. A small handprint smudged the inside. Dust stirred. He knew he was close. He ran up the stairs, past the attic, and into the hidden room. No mattress now. Only faint marks in the dust. Something led him to the far wall. He pressed his palm to the panel. Warm. Recent. Not dusted. Not abandoned. Mark forced it open. Inside, Eli sat cross-legged, facing him. Black curls over wide, dark eyes. His small hands rested on his knees. Not smiling. Not crying. Just watching. "Eli," Mark said, voice trembling. I want to help you." The boy's gaze didn't waver. Then, almost casually, "You're not my father." Mark swallowed. "I know, but I can..." I can keep you safe. I promise. Eli's eyes flicked toward the corner. Another small bundle, a drawing, carefully folded. He pushed it toward Mark with a single hand. Mark opened it, a map of the house. Crayon marks on every room, every secret space. Arrows leading from the attic to the basement, and then to the street outside. Scribbled words. Follow the path. Find the truth. Mark's breath caught. Eli. Why? Why hide? I wasn't hiding, the boy said quietly. I was learning, watching, waiting. You and Clara, you need to know who I am before I'm gone. Mark felt something snap inside him, a mix of relief, terror, and fury. He realized then that everything Clara had done, every secret, every lie, had been a desperate attempt to contain a child who was far beyond containment. He held the map close. The recorder, the shoebox, the photographs, all proof now. Proof of a hidden life. Proof of manipulation. Proof of a truth the world would struggle to understand. I'll take you somewhere safe, Mark said. Somewhere you can live. Properly. Eli tilted his head. Safe isn't anywhere you think. It's knowing the truth. Mark nodded slowly. Then we find it. Together. The boy's small hand slipped into Mark's. No fear. No trust. Just recognition. Mark looked around the attic, the room that had held years of secrets and shadows, and for the first time, he felt the weight shift. He had proof. He had Eli. And for the first time in years, the truth was finally in his hands. Mark didn't speak to Clara for hours after discovering Eli. He didn't need to. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, the map and shoebox spread before him, the recorder still humming faintly with Eli's last whisper. Clara's face was pale, eyes wide. She didn't sit, didn't speak, only stood, trembling, as though the weight of the house had shifted on its hinges. Mark looked up. We found him. Clara's lips parted. A sound, almost a whimper, escaped her. You did? Yes, Mark said, voice steady. He's here. He's alive. And he knows everything. Clara's knees buckled slightly. She leaned against the counter, gripping it like a lifeline. I did what I had to. What you had to, Mark echoed, disbelief sharp in his voice. You hid him, locked him in the attic. You lied to me, lied to everyone. And for what? Protection? Clara looked down, then up, tears brimming. Do you know what it's like to hold someone like that? I do now, Mark said. And it wasn't protection. It was fear. Fear of the child, fear of the truth, fear of facing what he might be. Clara shook her head. He could have been hurt. He had moments, dark moments I couldn't control. I didn't want anyone else to see. Mark stood, voice rising. Moments? He's a child. He's supposed to have moments, not be trapped in silence while you decide what's safe for him. Clara sobbed. You don't understand. You weren't here. I didn't know who he was going to become. I couldn't risk what might happen if he fell into the wrong hands. The wrong hands were yours, Mark said quietly, voice shaking with a mix of rage and sorrow. The child needed you to be a parent, not a warden. Clara's eyes filled with guilt. I thought I was helping him. I thought I was keeping him alive. You kept him alive, yes, Mark said, softening slightly. But at what cost? He was alone, afraid, and you. His voice caught. You betrayed everything he should have had. Love, honesty, a life outside shadows. Clara's body trembled. She sank onto a chair. I know, she whispered. I see it now. Every day I thought I was right, but I was wrong. Every lie, every secret. I thought it was for him. But I see now. It was also for me. Mark sat opposite her, exhausted, heart pounding. It has to end, Clara. All of it. The hiding, the lies, the fear. He needs a chance to grow without shadows. Clara nodded slowly, tears streaking her face. I'll tell everything. The doctors, the authorities, and anyone who needs to know. I'll face it. Mark studied her. The woman he had loved, feared, and now pitied, sitting before him, It's time, he said. Time to reckon. For him, for us, for the truth. Clara swallowed hard. I'm ready. I'll do it. I have to. Mark reached out, placing a hand over hers. She flinched slightly, then held it. For a moment, there was silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets, but a fragile, tentative quiet. The kind that follows confessions, the kind that signals a turning. Point outside, a crow cawed. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laugh echoed faintly. Mark's chest tightened. He didn't know if it was Eli or memory, but he felt it. Hope. Clara exhaled shakily. I'll go with you. I'll tell the truth. Mark nodded, letting the weight of that promise settle. It's not over, but it's starting. And for the first time in years, the house felt like it might breathe again.